Hello and welcome to another video in this series discussing effects for the 5th edition rule set in Fantasy Grounds Unity. In this video we're going to be looking at a few other modifiers that we haven't covered before, mainly the immunities, resistances and vulnerabilities. And if you look at the wiki, there's quite a lot of information there telling you the various values, descriptors, and some notes on the three abilities that we're going to, or three modifiers that we're going to look at. The wiki is a good place to start if you're creating your own effects because there is some valuable information to be gotten from reading through the wiki article. So let's get Bob going, and we'll look at resistance first. And as usual, we've got a power group here already set up. We're going to right click over this line here. We're going to add action and add effect. And then we're going to open up our dialog by clicking on the magnifying glass. And we will just look at resist on its own. We have resist and a colon, and then we'll just type the word all after it, and that is going to give Bob resistance to any kind of damage that we can throw at him. We want this effect to be sitting on Bob, otherwise he's not going to get any benefit at all. So we're going to switch the targeting to self to make sure that the effect sits on Bob. And when we open up our combat tracker, we've got Bob already here on the combat tracker, and we can apply the effect, and you can see the effect applying to Bob. So if we get the bad guy here to throw some damage at him, we've got some slashing damage here, and you can see that in the chat it tells us that the 5 points of damage were done, but only 2 points of damage was actually placed on Bob. The rest of it he resisted. Let's try some piercing damage instead, or some fire damage. Whatever kind of damage that we throw at Bob, he's going to resist it. It's going to only take half damage from the attack. So resist all essentially means that Bob is going to resist every kind of damage that's thrown at him. Now we can actually add exceptions to this. So if we go back into our effect here, and if we add a comma, and then if we add a pling character, and then let's type in slashing. So what this is saying is that Bob's going to resist all damage except slashing damage. So effectively he's only going to take half damage from fire, piercing, etc. But if we do slashing damage to Bob, then he's going to take all of the damage from that attack. So let's swap out the effects. And now if we do some piercing damage, we can see that Bob has resisted the damage, but if we now do some slashing damage to Bob, we can see that he didn't resist any of it. So we've created the exception, so he's got resistance to anything except slashing damage. Now we're not actually restricted to the normal kinds of damage that you'd expect, like slashing, piercing, bludgeoning, fire, etc. We can also specify, for example, silver damage. So that would be any kind of damage which comes from a silvered weapon. So if we just change out the slashing there, we keep the pling in because we need that as an exception. So this is reading, we're going to resist all damage except that which is coming from silver damage. So if we swap back out our effects here, and we can see that our bad guy here has actually got a silvered weapon. But if we do some piercing damage, first of all, we can see that Bob has resisted that piercing damage. But now when we do damage with a silvered weapon, then Bob doesn't resist it, and all the damage gets through. So any weapon that attack that has silver in it, Bob will take the full amount of damage. We can also accept magic, the damage. So let's leave the silver in, put another comma in, and we'll put another pling character, and this time we'll type in the word magic. So this time Bob's going to resist all damage except damage which is caused by a silvered weapon or by a magical weapon. It doesn't matter if it's a silver and magical weapon, it's either or, it doesn't matter. So we'll close that off, we'll remove that, and we'll apply the effect to Bob. We better give him some hit points back in case we kill him. And so now if we deal some damage here with this light crossbow, which is piercing and magic, he's going to take all of the damage from that. If we use this longsword, he takes all of the damage for that because it has magic in it. If we use the silvered weapon up here, he's going to take all the damage from that because it's got silver and magic. But if we deal him some fire damage, then he's going to resist that because the fire damage was neither magical nor was it silver. And similarly with the poison damage up above here, if we deal some poison damage, he's going to resist that because the poison didn't have magic or silver in it. Now, Bob might actually only have resistance to one kind of damage. We've made it resistance to all at the moment, but we can also specify the kind of damage that Bob is resistant to. So if we wanted to do that, if we wanted to make him resist only slashing damage, then we would just type in slashing after the resist. We can add this effect now. And if we do some piercing damage to Bob, you can see that he takes the full damage. But if we do slashing damage now, you'll see that he partially resists it. And it doesn't matter here that it's a silvered weapon, and it won't matter here that this is a magic weapon because we haven't specified, we haven't excluded silvered or magic or anything like that. So we're simply saying that he is going to resist any slashing damage that we throw at him. If we wanted to refine this and say that he's only going to resist slashing damage if it isn't magic, then we can do our pling thing again, adding in the pling, and then we will type in magic, swap out the effects, and now if Bob gets hit with a silvered sword, he's going to resist the damage, but if he takes slashing damage from a magic sword, then he's not going to resist the damage and it's all going to get through. We can also chain damage types here. So if we wanted to give Bob resistance to slashing, fire and poison, then we can. We just list them, comma separated. We're not going to worry about any exceptions here. So we're just going to apply that. So if we do some slashing damage to Bob, then he is going to resist. If we do some fire, he's going to resist. Poison damage, he's also going to resist that. But if we deal some piercing damage to Bob, then he's not going to resist that. All the damage is going to get through. So the resistance can take a number of parameters, each one as long as it's a recognized damage type by the rule set. Now finally, we can specify an amount of damage that Bob is resistant to. So if we take all of this out here, and let's suppose that Bob is going to be resistant to the first 3 points of slashing damage. So we type in 3 in here. Now this can only be a number, it can't be a dice. So we can only have a number here. It will take a PC tag as well. So we can have resist 3 and then a comma, and then we can list the slashing types or resist the damage types. We can have more than just slashing if we wanted to, separated by a comma, but we'll just use this. So we'll apply this effect. And if now Bob takes some slashing damage, we can see that he's partially resisted it. 8 points of damage were dealt. Bob only took 5 because he is resisting the first 3 points of damage. And it doesn't matter that these are magical or silver weapons because we haven't specified this in the effect. Here again, 7 points of damage was dealt. Bob only took 4. But if we deal some piercing damage to him, then he takes all of that because none of that is resisted. We're only resisting the first 3 points of slashing damage. Okay, that's resistance. Let's now have a look at immunity. Now, in many ways, this is similar to resistance with a few exceptions. And our condition here, or our effect here, is going to be immune, and then we have a colon. And then once again, if we type all at the end of that, then that's effectively going to mean that Bob's going to have resistance to any damage that we throw at him. So if we deal some slashing damage or piercing damage, whatever we throw at him, then Bob's going to resist it all. He's going to take no damage whatsoever. We can limit the immunity by specifying the damage types to which Bob's going to be immune. So if we type in slashing here, then he's only going to be immune to slashing damage. We can type further damage types in here. So if we also wanted him to have immunity to piercing damage, then we would just type that in as well. Just a list, comma separated, etc. If we apply this effect now, and if we do some slashing damage to Bob, he's not going to take any. Some piercing damage, he's not going to take any. But if we do some fire damage, then he's going to take all of the fire damage that we throw at him because he doesn't have any immunities. If we want him to, or if we want to overcome the immunities here to, let's say we want to make it piercing or slashing non-magical damage, then we can come in here and add in the pling magic to this effect. We can take that out and apply this, and now what we're saying is that Bob's immune to slashing or piercing except if it's going to be magical damage. So if we do some non-magical damage here, he's going to resist, but if we do some magical slashing damage here, then he's going to take the damage from that. And similarly, if he's going to take some magical piercing damage, he's going to take all of the damage from that. So the exception here, or the pling magic, is accepting this. Is saying that we're going to be immune to slashing or piercing damage except if the damage is magic. And we could also add in silver here as well, similarly to what we saw before with resistance. Now you can also have immunity to a condition, not just damage. So if we take out the damage type here, and let's supposing that we want to make Bob immune to the stunned condition. So we still have immune and the colon, but then we just type in the word stunned into here, and this will mean that Bob is going to be immune to the stunned condition. So if we remove that and apply this effect here, and if we now try and let's get the bad guy up here, and if we try and apply the stunned condition to Bob, and it tells you down here that we've tried to place an effect on Bob, but the target is immune, and so the stunned condition hasn't come on to Bob. If we remove this effect altogether and then just drag this on here, try dragging it on, we can see that the stun condition has now been placed on Bob because he no longer has this immunity to being stunned. So you can have immunity to any of the conditions which Fantasy Grounds recognizes, except I believe the exhausted condition. I don't think you can be immune to that, but any of the other ones will work. So there's one other word or one other effect or condition modifier that we should look at, and that's the vulnerable one. And basically this is just the exact opposite of immunities and resistances, in that it makes you vulnerable to damage. And once again, we just type in the modifier vuln and then a colon, and if we type in all, then Bob's going to be vulnerable to all the damage that we throw at him. So if we do some fire damage to Bob, you can see here it's saying that it's vulnerable to it, so it's doubled the damage that that was rolled. We rolled 5 and Bob has taken 10 points of damage. And similarly, if we do some slashing damage to Bob, I wish Discord would stop doing that, then he's going to take double the amount of damage. And of course we can limit what he's vulnerable to. So if he's just vulnerable to slashing damage, then we just type in the damage type that he's going to be vulnerable to, remove this one and apply this one. And now if he takes some slashing damage, then he's taking double, but if we apply some fire damage, then he's just going to take the normal amount of damage. It's not going to be doubled. We could also limit this if, for example, we wanted to make him vulnerable to slashing damage, except if it was silver, then we can add in the pling silver. If we now swap out these effects, if he takes some damage from a slashing weapon that also has silver in it, then he's going to take a normal amount of damage. But if he takes a slashing damage from this other weapon here, then he's going to be vulnerable and he's going to take double damage. So I think that's it for resistances, immunities and vulnerabilities. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.